This is the exact moment when 7-year-old Arthur Labinjo Hughes would give up on life. And within 5 hours, an emergency 999 call would be made that would reveal to the world the most heartbreaking story on the internet. The story of Arthur Labinjo Hughes.
Ambulance service, is the patient breathing?
Barely.
Okay, is he breathing right now though, even if he's...
Is he breathing, Tom? He keeps taking big dark breaths. Basically, my 6-year-old stepson is fallen, he's banged his head.
Okay.
And while he was on the floor, he's banged his head another 5 times.
Okay.
He's lost colour, he's got a big lump on his head.
Away.
He'd fallen and hit his head, but he was found in a condition that a fall could not justify.
If Arthur could ask for one final thing, it would be that he was remembered for his superpowers. And Arthur's superpower was his smile.
He was surrounded by many guardian angels, but during COVID-19, Arthur had to be confined with pure evil and lived through hell every day of his life. The Midlands, England Police Department would soon discover the most horrific secret clips and videos that they'd wish they could unsee.
Emergency Rich Service.
The call came in on June 17, 2020. 6-year-old Arthur Labinjo Hughes had taken a fall down the stairs, and the voice on the line was frantic. Paramedics arrived to find him gasping for air, and despite every effort to save him, Arthur's life slipped away. It seemed like a tragic accident until the doctors noticed something that would haunt them for years. There were horrific injuries that didn't match the story from the call. Arthur had died of a catastrophic brain injuries. The doctors said the damage was equivalent to a car crash. Even the paramedics on the scene noted severe head trauma and multiple bruises across his body. The truth was hidden in plain sight, buried in the frantic words and background noises of the 999 call that would change everything. When the recording was played again, this time with sharper ears and deeper suspicion, the real story behind Arthur's tragic end would leave everyone shocked. What had once seemed like desperation now echoed with something far darker.
Is breathing noisy or abnormal?
Is it noisy or abnormal? It's barely there, he's barely breathing, he's in and out, he's taking hard.
Okay.
He's basically been treating us all up. He's threw himself on the floor, he's headbutting the floor. I'm trying to pick him up in the process, he's headbutting me in the process.
Okay.
I've got him up, he was breathing like a little bit better at first.
Yeah.
Washed him down, put some water down him, tried to obviously get him like, a bit more colour in him, but then obviously I've seen the lump on his head that he's done to himself.
Right.
The female voice you just heard was 32-year-old Emma Tustin, the caregiver and stepmother of 6-year-old Arthur Labinjo Hughes. His father, 29-year-old Thomas Hughes, wasn't present when the alleged accident occurred, leaving Emma as the sole witness of Arthur's last moments. She was also the one who accompanied Arthur to the hospital, recounting how he suffered the injuries. But something didn't sit right with the doctors. Their suspicions led them to involve the police, and soon detectives were asking Emma for her first official statement.
Just briefly, what happened?
Basically, he'd gone out to get me a birthday cake and stuff for the kids. Arthur was told to sit on the thinking step. Arthur's put himself all over the floor. He's banged himself off the radiator. He's hit me, he's kicked me in the process of me trying to get him back on the thinking step.
The thinking step was the punishment area designed for Arthur by his father Thomas and stepmother Emma. It was a place for him to stand and reflect on his actions. According to Emma, Arthur frequently found himself there due to his behavior. However, on the evening of June 17, 2020, the day of his death, Arthur was especially rude and physically violent.
He's then gone on all fours on the floor and I've told him to get up. And I shut the door over and all I heard was a crack off the floor. Like I say, he's like the last 6 months, he's battered both my kids. He's smashed this house. And even so, I've done my best for that kid. I tried to get him off the floor. But he'd banged his head 3 or 4 times. Obviously the ambulance picked him up. He'd knocked himself unconscious. I picked him up, put him on the sofa, poured water in his mouth.
So you've come in, he's banged his head 3 or 4
I was
times
in the living room,
here.
I was in the kitchen, then I'd sat down in the living room and that's for himself on the floor.
And you heard him banging his head. So what did you do?
I came out to him and told him to get up. He told me no. So I tried to bear hug him. I put my arms underneath him and pick him up. And he dropped and he banged his head another 3 times off the floor. And as I picked him up, he hit me and he kicked me as I was trying to get him up.
Emma had an emotional moment talking about the unruly child who abused her. Like many other stepmothers, her affection was not reciprocated. However, Emma's story largely stayed the same as the details in the 999 call, and the narrative failed to align. Further investigation was essential, but it would still lead to a truth so disturbing it would stick with the investigators for the rest of their careers. Arthur was put on life support, but by 1 a.m. the following day, it was determined that there was nothing more that could be done, and the life support was switched off. As the investigation pressed on, a forensic examination revealed Arthur had over 130 separate injuries in various stages of healing from head to toe. Every single part of his tiny body was bruised and hurt. His thymus gland and one of his kidneys were severely shrunken, a result of prolonged physical stress. However, the cause of death was bleeding on the brain and a complete detachment of the retina in his right eye. Little did the experts know that this was just the very tip of the iceberg. When he was first taken to the hospital, he had severely elevated levels of sodium in his body. 7 hours later, these levels remained unchanged, indicating that his body couldn't properly absorb the excess salt he'd ingested. It was estimated that to achieve such sodium levels, Arthur would have needed to consume 6 tablespoons of salt in one day, or, more likely, be poisoned with high levels of salt over several days. The autopsy report and the inflicted injuries clearly amounted to torture, but it wasn't even that made this the most notorious case in Middleton. It was the horrific discoveries that were yet to emerge during the investigation, capturing public attention like a raging wildfire. Authorities had discovered the unimaginable horror that was forced upon the innocent child, and they were closing in on the sadistic monster who had committed the unthinkable. There was little doubt something was not right behind teary-eyed Emma and fidgety Thomas's story. Speculations were swirling across the country, but it soon became evident that these were not merely assumptions. The challenge was to find what horrors cooked behind the scenes. The Middleton police quickly obtained a search warrant for Emma's 2-bedroom house where she lived with her boyfriend, Thomas Hughes, and their children from previous marriages. At first glance, nothing seemed particularly noteworthy, except for a CCTV camera installed in the living room. Emma and Thomas told investigators it was for monitoring Arthur and ensuring he didn't harm himself. When the investigators took the recordings for further investigation, they had no clue it contained horrifying secrets that they would wish they could unsee. The CCTV footage contained heartbreaking details of little Arthur's final hours, scenes that would terrify everyone who laid eyes on them. This disturbing recording was a couple of hours before Arthur had the alleged accident. Arthur begged for someone named Blake to come and rescue him. So who were these people that Arthur was counting on near his end? Blake was Arthur's uncle, brother of Thomas Hughes. Arthur could be seen frail, weak, and barely standing when he called for his family beyond Emma and Thomas. As the hours of these recordings were being investigated, detectives would reach out to Arthur's grandparents and Uncle Blake. The family was not only forthcoming, but had much to share. Arthur was born on January 4, 2014. Just a year earlier, he was one of the happiest children one could meet. He adored superheroes and was a big fan of Birmingham City Football Club.
Arthur, are you going to play for England? No, why not?
After when I've played for Liverpool, I can play for Tottenham.
Firstly, Arthur was the happiest child. He was very, very much loved by everyone. He was my daughter's baby bear, and he was my sunny delight. As I say, he's very happy-go-lucky.
People who knew him described him as bright and full of energy. However, as the grandparents would delve into the details, it would become quite clear Arthur was a happy but not a very lucky child. He was born to a couple, Thomas and Olivia Labinjo Holcrow, that had met during drug dates together. When the parents separated, Arthur remained with Olivia, but she would enter into a new relationship that was toxic through and through. It was a man named Gary Cunningham, whom she had met during an alcohol awareness course. Both Olivia and Gary were violent towards each other. This toxic relationship ultimately reached a tragic climax in February 2019 when Olivia, in a drunken rage, killed Gary by stabbing him 12 times. However, the most shocking part about this incident was that little Arthur was actually witnessing the murder. In 2020, Olivia was sentenced for 11 years. As the mother served her sentence, little Arthur moved in with his father Thomas and his grandparents. The love he'd known primarily came from his grandparents and his Uncle Blake. This was the safest time Arthur had ever experienced. But the wave of happy time would soon die down, and the trail of misfortune began with a simple date. His father, Thomas, would go on a date with a woman named Emma Tustin that he'd met online. As the investigation would open, detectives would get to know Emma had a history of erratic and attention-seeking behavior. Back in 2013, she'd jumped from the top of a multi-story car park after her boyfriend threatened to leave her. On another occasion, she threw herself out of a bedroom window to prevent her partner from going to the pub with his best friend. An ex-boyfriend of hers was interviewed by the Daily Mail, and he said, "She's a black widow and she sucks the life out of every man she gets together with. She has no maternal instinct whatsoever. She wanted children for the attention they brought her as newborns and for the child benefits, but once the attention died away and she was left at home with a baby, she didn't want to know." She was also blamed to be a neglectful mother, and social services often made visits to her house. What happened when this woman stepped into Thomas and ultimately Arthur's lives would be the final use of her evil. Though Thomas was never the best father, he wasn't a complete nightmare either. However, that would soon change as he and Emma grew closer, leaving Arthur to lose his father in a way he never anticipated. Arthur joined his father and Emma on several outings, but each time he returned, the grandparents found him increasingly reluctant to go back with them.
His dad came to pick him up, and Arthur said to his dad, "Is she in the car?" And his dad said yes, and Arthur started to cry, which isn't like Arthur.
When we're saying she, you mean?
I'm assuming it was Emma.
The warmth of family was fading, replaced by an unsettling tension he couldn't quite understand. According to his grandparents, they first saw something was not right in their own home. Arthur was terrified of Emma and often tried to hide whenever she visited. Thomas's parents and brother were not fond of her either, sensing an air of deceit and disregard. However, they couldn't have anticipated the extent of what was unfolding. During one of Emma's visits, as Arthur's grandmother tried to buy him a Subway sandwich, Emma abruptly told her not to feed him, claiming it was an unnecessary indulgence to him. This brief encounter served as a warning sign, revealing just how comfortable and eager Emma was to make decisions about Arthur's life. But it wasn't just her. Thomas's behavior was also changing. He'd begun to lose his temper easily. After a night at Emma's, Thomas returned with Arthur, and Blake noticed the little boy staring blankly at the wall. It was an unusual sight for a child. When Blake attempted to cheer him up with a snack, Thomas intervened, insisting that Arthur was being punished and shouldn't be fed. This was just the beginning of a nightmare that would only worsen. As the pandemic surged, the Prime Minister declared a complete lockdown.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home. Because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between households.
As people confined themselves to their homes to avoid danger, Arthur had the danger inside his own home. He fell under the wing of his father Thomas in Emma's house, separated from his beloved grandparents, and was rarely able to see them. Events were slowly aligning for a gradual decline for Arthur. During one occasion in lockdown, Arthur's grandmother noticed a blue bruise on his shoulder.
Straight away, I said, "These are non-accidental injuries." I said, "They're caused by an adult hand." I said, "His right shoulder, I can see three fingers." I said, "His left shoulder," I said, "that has been caused by hitting with something or being pushed against something." But the most disturbing thing to me, and I said this to Chris and Joe, I said, "There's new bruises on top of old," which tells me this has been going on. And, there's yellow bruises, there was purple bruises, all over his back.
Take your time.
And I just seen them, I just imagined the pain Arthur would have been in.
Despite being Thomas's mother, she acted quickly and filed a complaint with social services. The following day, when Arthur returned to Emma and Thomas's house, a representative from social services called Emma and came to visit. However, no action was taken. They claimed there's no bruise, insisting that Arthur and Emma's two other children appeared happy and well. However, the grandmother found the call before making the visit reason enough for Emma to be alert and take necessary steps to cover up. So Blake attempted to contact the Middleton police. But unfortunately, the officers never reached Arthur because they thought the case was taken by the social services. It wasn't just once. The family tried to ask for help for Arthur again and again. However, there'd be no result. Something horrible was happening to Arthur, and nobody could do anything.
They're wicked, evil.
In the meantime, the investigation into Arthur's death was flaring up. Arthur's grandparents and family pointed fingers at Emma and Thomas, but they weren't sure what could have led to Arthur's demise. A deeper investigation was launched against the couple, and the ugliest truths started to surface. Investigators seized their phones and began reviewing the contents. What they discovered in the audio recordings and text messages exchanged between Emma and Thomas was shocking. With each new line that appeared on the screen, the weight of what had been hidden behind closed doors became unbearably clear. Emma and Thomas were complicit in this nightmare, and their messages revealed the extent of their twisted partnership. The messages explained Arthur's living situation filled with hunger, isolation, and physical abuse. In most of these texts, Emma complained about the boy, venting frustrations, but also documenting her escalating cruelty. She was depriving Arthur of food and drink, forcing him to stand for hours in the hallway as a form of punishment. The little boy's cries for food and comfort were met with mockery. His desperation was called misbehavior in these messages. The messages back and forth served as a twisted form of reinforcement for both Emma and Thomas. She'd often record Arthur's distressed pleas, sending audio clips to Thomas when he wasn't at home, as if seeking approval for her harsh treatment. In response, Thomas would express his own frustration with Arthur and encourage her to be even more severe, telling her to just end him or suggesting violent measures to silence his cries. At times, the couple was just a few feet away from Arthur as they texted, their phones buzzing with cruel exchanges while the boy was left to cry himself hoarse in the hallway or suffer alone in his room. Emma expressed annoyance over Arthur's need for affection, calling it as him acting out or labeling it as spoiling him. Emma and Thomas discussed that Arthur should not be given certain foods or that he should be punished for minor infractions. The abuse wasn't limited to neglect. These messages were laden with verbal abuse and name-calling. The hatred for him in these messages was prominent from both sides. The messages provided clear evidence that the household atmosphere was one of intimidation and physical torment. Arthur had endured repeated assaults. In one of the messages, it came out that Emma and Thomas had a disagreement, leading Emma to express that she could accept Thomas, but not Arthur. Thomas responded sharply, insisting that she'd have to take both him and Arthur, or none at all. This exchange revealed the troubling dynamics of their relationship, as Emma's rejection of Arthur only increased Thomas's frustration. This tension indicated that Thomas's anger could easily escalate, leading to further mistreatment of Arthur. There were many questions, but one thing was clear. Arthur was living a miserable life, often going without food. One piece of CCTV footage that previously seemed insignificant took on a new meaning for the investigators. The footage revealed Thomas and Emma relaxing and enjoying ice cream on one of the hottest days of the year. Meanwhile, Arthur was forced to stand on the stairs, sweltering and starving, denied water while wearing a thick onesie that only added to his discomfort. Thomas sat cross-legged while Emma hunched over, indulging in McDonald's right in front of a starving Arthur who remained helpless in the hallway. The question arose, were all of Emma's children suffering in the same way? Arthur's grandparents informed the investigators that Emma's children were often left unfed for long hours, abandoned while Emma stayed in her room. However, what Arthur endured was uniquely horrific. In none of the footage did Emma's children appear to suffer the same level of abuse that Arthur did. Later, Emma's children would tell investigators that they too faced punishment if they tried to help Arthur. The disturbing details of this case seemed never-ending, as another heart-wrenching clip awaited their review. In these clips, Arthur could be seen standing and shuffling his feet. At first glance, it seemed harmless, until they realized he'd stood straight for up to 14 hours. As the harrowing details got closer, police would tighten their grip on Thomas and Emma, questioning them about Arthur and the heartbreaking details in the tapes. Piece by piece, Thomas and Emma's story of accident began to change. But it was Thomas who would come loose first and tell them the truth that was even more nightmarish than they already knew. Thomas told them that he might have gone too far in punishing Arthur. He described to the investigators that Arthur had some behavior issues because of which Emma and the family suffered. Although it was hard to understand what crime a 6-year-old could do to him to deserve a punishment, Thomas was about to tell. He'd learned about torture methods used during interrogation, methods that gave the maximum of pain without leaving scarring or bruises. So what really happened on June 17, 2020? Arthur was suffering for long, but did his body just give up? No, it was a simple and heartless truth of the case. There was in fact an even more heinous reality to the case. Thomas had gone to the supermarket with Emma's children while Arthur was left behind as usual. Starved and frail Arthur couldn't have done anything that Emma couldn't handle on her own, but she pinged to Thomas that Arthur was creating a problem when he told her to discipline him. Within a few hours, Emma decided to take things in her own hands and led Arthur to death. When Thomas returned, Arthur was already unconscious after Emma had already smashed his head against the wall several times. When Arthur didn't get up after a few failed attempts, Emma decided to call 999 with a story of how Arthur beat himself and then took a fall. Thomas shamelessly would tell the investigators it was his own fault and Emma should be let free. He told them it was him not being able to control Arthur and then being carried away and getting him killed. Emma was not to be blamed. The disturbing case shook the country from Middleton to the Parliament.
The public deserve to know why, in this rare case, things went horrifyingly wrong and what more could be done to prevent such as this happening again in the future.
With Arthur's death and the injuries clearly not self-inflicted, the authorities finally saw through Emma and Thomas's lies. Both were arrested and charged with Arthur's death. On December 3, 2021, at Emma's trial, the judge described the fatal attack as follows. The final act of killing was done by you, Tustin. You shook him so that his head was hyperextended and flexed on his neck, while simultaneously hitting it against the wall or the floor multiple times. The level of violence you used produced forces on his body equivalent to those experienced in a high-speed road traffic collision. The injuries sustained were extensive and devastating. Emma was convicted of murder and received a life sentence with a minimum term of 29 years. Thomas Hughes, who wasn't present during the fatal assault, was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 21 years in prison. In December 2020, it was revealed that their sentences would be reviewed to assess if they were too lenient, possibly leading to longer terms for both. Emma had 4 children from previous relationships, though by the time she met Thomas, only the 2 youngest were still living with her. By then, Emma had already been reported to social services several times due to concerns about her children's welfare. However, she'd become skilled at manipulating these situations. Whenever social services visited, she'd resort to emotional tactics, crying and portraying herself as the victim. Each time, the authorities would leave without taking any further action. Social services had been part of the narrative all along, but their absence in action was a plot twist no one saw coming.
That social services couldn't intervene, and therefore it was down to the grandmother to seek further help?
Does just going to social services not trigger a multi-agency intervention? You have to go to a doctor. I don't understand.
It would trigger an intervention. You can put it into the multi-agency sharing hub. It will be looked at. It triggered the actual point of a social worker going out, but it's the matter of delay and the severity of when that was seen. And I wouldn't disparage anyone doing a referral, but what I'm saying is if you have a child that you're concerned is actually being harmed, medical professionals can support you as well to speed up the process and to actually see that moment in time of those injuries.
How is it the social services were involved so early in this case, yet Arthur's prolonged suffering was overlooked? What role do you think the social service played in sealing Arthur's fate? What do you think should have been done to rescue young Arthur from his merciless fate?
Warning, this man may kill you.
What?
I don't know, so be careful.
On the chilly afternoon of October 13th, 2011, a 14-year-old budding YouTuber, Cheyanne Kircher, simply vanished from her home in East Dubuque, Illinois, leaving behind nothing but a mysterious note that would make the police go around in circles. But what seemed like a runaway case from the get-go soon turned out to be one of the most shocking and twisted cases. Cheyanne had unintentionally captured the person who would be responsible for her sudden disappearance. When the detectives got to work, a chilling plot was uncovered. Who this mystery man was and what he did to Cheyanne left the whole community completely horrified.
Is this where Cheyanne? Yes, that is where Cheyanne's at. And how did she get here? By me.
When Cheyanne Kircher went missing on October 13th, 2011, all she left behind was her phone, a change of clothes, and a handwritten note. Authorities learned of her disappearance after her family noticed she hadn't returned home from school as expected. Her family initially took matters into their own hands, searching the area and calling on friends and family to help. When their efforts yielded no results, they eventually contacted the authorities. Little did they know, the web of clues in this case would take a triple alliance of police forces to crack the case.
I first heard of Cheyanne Kircher as a missing person from East Dubuque, Illinois. A report went out to all agencies that she had been reported missing.
Chief O'Connell called me and had me come in because we were going to start calling a bunch of friends and family members.
Nearly a year before her disappearance, Cheyanne started posting quirky, lighthearted videos on her first YouTube channel named Cheyanne 2010. These videos provided insight into her personality and showed her sense of humor, with Cheyanne often acting in skits and performing comedic bits. So when this happy kid went missing one day, the entire community was on high alert. As soon as her disappearance was reported, officers, along with search dogs, combed through the family home. The search extended into the surrounded wooded areas near their residence, but despite these efforts, they couldn't locate her.
Cheyanne liked to go to the park, and so we would look around the park in places where maybe she could stay, sleep, eat. The school was another favorite place of hers. There's a playground, the football field is there. She could have been anywhere.
We had made a visit to the house, to Cheyanne's house. I did not go in the house at that point in time. I just stayed outside. We also made a visit to the school, and I cleaned out Cheyanne's locker. We kept everything that was in that locker. We also interviewed a guidance counselor.
For those familiar with Cheyanne's circumstances, the idea that she might have wanted to leave home wasn't entirely surprising, as the family dynamics were a bit unusual.
She lived with her mom and her stepdad, Terry Abbas, and then another adult male that Cheyanne would share was her mom's boyfriend, and then she had an older brother and a younger brother. She seemed always a little disheveled.
Cheyanne's biological father had been out of the picture ever since Lori separated from him when Cheyanne was 8 years old. She remarried a man named Terry Abbas, whom Cheyanne affectionately referred to as her dad. Terry had quickly become the closest figure she had to a father after the loss of her relationship with her biological father, who she had known only in her earliest years. Yet there was an added layer of complexity in her home environment, as Lori's boyfriend, Steve Staver, also resided in the family home alongside Terry. It's unknown when exactly Steve entered the picture, but the decision to move him into the home seemed very normal to Lori, her husband, and her new boyfriend. Yet the family's dynamics were not the only, nor even the most troubling factor. It was the condition of the house itself that raised the most serious concerns. When investigators arrived at the home to speak with Cheyanne's family, they encountered what one described as an unbearable smell, unlike anything they'd experienced before. Inside there were piles of trash, heaps of dirty laundry, and extensive filth coating nearly every room. The stench covered the entire home, creating a severely unhygienic and unpleasant environment. The horrendous living conditions, combined with the unusual household setup and the note left behind, initially led authorities to view this as a classic runaway case, with Cheyanne simply trying to escape her reality.
When you look at the amount of risk factors that were in this case, you're almost guaranteed that you've got either a future victim or a future offender, or somebody that may escape those things but is going to have many issues that they need to overcome, which is quite a bleak way to look at a case like this.
Given the circumstances, law enforcement didn't find it difficult to believe the contents of Cheyanne's note, which was the only clue they had. In the note, Cheyanne had bid farewell to her family, explicitly telling them not to search for her. She explained that she was leaving to pursue a better life elsewhere. The note, the deplorable living conditions, and the strained family life all painted a picture of a young girl in desperate need of an escape, and her actions appeared to confirm her decision to run away. But everyone in the community had the same questions.
Where the heck did she go? Did somebody take her? Did she really run away? I couldn't imagine that she ran away, but I had a feeling of urgency. The longer you wait, the less likely of a positive outcome.
However, what the detectives uncovered next would completely change the direction of the case. Certain details didn't quite align with a straightforward runaway case. When police combed through the house, they noticed that Cheyanne had left behind her cell phone, an item she was known to keep close at all times. Even more curiously, she left her jacket and shoes she was wearing that day, an odd decision given the time of year. With winter approaching, temperatures had already started to drop near freezing, making it unlikely that Cheyanne would willingly leave without appropriate clothing. These unusual factors suggested to law enforcement that perhaps there was more to her disappearance than what initially met the eye. Since there seemed to be some hope of her being around, the police kept trying to locate her. The detectives reached out to Cheyanne's grandparents, Gary and Mary Jo Kircher, who shared their memories and concerns about her.
We did hear information that there was a letter that they found that said something to the effect that, nobody's to blame, I just don't want to be found, I'm okay, and that was it. And then on the 31st, which is a few days after, my wife's birthday, she had never missed a Halloween at all and her birthday. And I told my wife, I said, something's really wrong, because even if she would have ran away, she would have got a phone and called and said, happy birthday, Grandma. And that's when I, kind of felt it was going downhill from that.
Next, the detectives decided to learn about Cheyanne's school life, hoping that maybe some lead or information could help complete this complex puzzle.
The one time there was a rainstorm, and a lot of kids weren't going to school because it was raining so hard. She walked from where her house is at up to the elementary school in the pouring down rain. She looked like a wet rat, they said, when she came in. The teachers took her off the side. They always have like sweatpants and sweatshirts there. Got her in some dry clothes, got her hair dry, and then put her other stuff in the dryer so when she could go home. But that's how much education meant to her.
However, her time at school could also be a significant source of unhappiness. She genuinely wanted to fit in, and being accepted by her peers was something she longed for.
What I knew about Cheyanne was that she needed some tender care. She was a student who liked attention, maybe not always positive attention. It could have been negative attention. She struggled with some social settings. However, she really wanted to belong.
I think she was bullied about her behavior and how she would have outbursts and stuff, and she couldn't control her behavior. And to some kids, that's uncomfortable.
After speaking with Cheyanne's friends and family, it became clear that her running away was a strong possibility.
At the end of that particular day, we had learned that Cheyanne had been the victim of bullying at school. We had learned that Cheyanne's home life was not the best. So we were, at that point, leaning towards and confident that we had a runaway 14-year-old that was hiding out somewhere with a friend in Dubuque.
But this was just the beginning. This simple runaway case would lead the detectives to the most deranged suspect ever. Cheyanne's family and friends made heartfelt public pleas for any information about her whereabouts, hoping someone might come forward with clues.
Somebody who's so outgoing and so creative and, wants to be friends with everybody. I just don't understand, what would push a child to run away and tell their parents, I love you, you did nothing wrong.
But as months passed with no confirmed leads, the police search gradually lost momentum, though her family held on to the hope that she would one day walk through their door. By 2013, with Cheyanne missing for nearly 2 years, the local sheriff's department handed the case over to a specialized police team. There was a higher chance of a mastermind committing a crime and getting away with it so far, but that was soon to change. Lead detective Dave Hackmeister shifted his focus, treating the investigation with the seriousness of a potential homicide. One challenge loomed large. Cheyanne had no dental records on file. If a body were to be discovered, those records would be essential for identification, making her case all the more challenging. In March 2013, authorities enlisted the newly formed Critical Incident Response Team to reinvigorate the investigation into Cheyanne Kircher's disappearance. This specialized team was composed of law enforcement officials from multiple counties, as well as personnel from the FBI, all bringing new resources and perspectives to the case. Team members began by retracing the steps previously taken by the East Dubuque Police Department, hoping that a fresh approach would reveal new leads. Their first task was a forensic examination of Cheyanne's old damaged cell phone. It had never been analyzed because it was thought to be inoperable. But the phone had every bit of shocking information that detectives least hoped to find.
Cheyanne had been on the internet speaking with older men, so that was a concern of ours.
To their surprise, the phone contained valuable information, revealing that Cheyanne, a frequent YouTube user and internet browser, had been in contact with individuals from far-reaching locations, including Florida, Texas, and Alaska. With the FBI's extensive national resources, investigators quickly identified and reached out to these contacts, interviewing each of them. However, despite these efforts, investigators found no evidence that any of these individuals had been involved in Cheyanne's disappearance. As this line of inquiry reached a dead end, detectives shifted their attention back to Cheyanne's immediate family, looking for any indication that her disappearance could be linked to those closest to her. The case was just beginning to take a much more sinister shape. Could the detectives' suspicions be right? If yes, what could possibly be the motive for her family members to do something to her?
Mom was a suspect. Mom's boyfriend was a suspect.
But most importantly, detectives were suspicious of Cheyanne's older brother. In fact, his threats and rude behavior was caught on camera.
Okay, I'm back, ladies and gentlemen. What the double hockey stick? What are you doing in my room?
Not your room, dumbass.
Get out of my room.
Touch me again, I'll break your hands.
Warning, this man may kill you.
However, investigating this further, the relationship between Cheyanne and her older brother turned out to be like any other sibling relationship. And right after dismissing him as a suspect, investigators were about to uncover some disturbing new information which would leave them shocked. Cheyanne had previously suggested to a few people that she'd been abused by her stepfather, Terry Abbas. In July 2011, Cheyanne confided in a friend that Terry Abbas might have been molesting her, alleging SA.
When Cheyanne came to school, she would tell me a lot about her home life. One time, her stepdad, she called him Terry. And she was very upset because she got home from school and her mom was at work and he was on the computer. He was looking up porn and other girls and she threatened to tell her mom on him. He definitely gave me the creeps and probably every staff member here the creeps. I mean, you could just tell there was something not right about him.
She had even suggested that he was watching her inappropriately, including spying on her while she was in the bathroom. Another confirmation of abuse came from someone so unexpected that detectives could never have predicted: Terry Abbas's own biological daughter, Sharia Chambers.
It started off, like visitation, supervised. It started off with my grandma, and then after a while, I guess they approved him to have visits with us alone, and then turned to overnight.
During those overnight visits in East Dubuque, Sheree says she met Cheyanne Kircher. She says Kircher confided in her that Abbas was abusing her.
I told her that she needed to go to teachers, she needed to go to somebody she trusted, she needed to go and tell somebody, because I couldn't help her. She's seen the consequences of telling him no, so part of me wants to think that she's too scared to go and ask for help.
Detectives later learned that Cheyanne had been interviewed by law enforcement at the time regarding these claims, but she'd not disclosed any further details or confirmed abuse during those interviews. But the real clue was about to come from Cheyanne's YouTube channel. An old video that Cheyanne had streamed live would turn out to be a key element in solving her mysterious disappearance. On February 19th, 2011, things took an interesting turn when Cheyanne launched a new YouTube channel, Shy Love 2011. This channel essentially served as a continuation of her previous one, though with time, she began introducing new content that showcased her family members as featured stars.
Look at Cheyanne and her poor clothes.
No! He bit me!
If he jacks you in the face, I'm gonna laugh my ass off.
Without a dedicated filming space, Cheyanne made videos by recording in the family's shared spaces where her stepfather, Terry Abbas, would often be visible in the background. Occasionally, Cheyanne would jokingly throw comments his way, sparking playful bickering that seemed to reflect the typical hostilities between family members rather than any serious conflict. In fact, she seemed to care for the man she called Dad, often posting about him affectionately on her Facebook page. That raised eyebrows right away. Could that man have been involved in all of this? Investigators, while carefully reviewing her channel for any leads, saw little in the content that pointed to anything other than typical family dynamics. Her videos appeared lighthearted, and for a while, her YouTube account seemed like a dead end in the investigation. But little did they know, at this moment, they'd discover something very shocking which would turn the case in a completely different direction. One video had caught their attention. It was posted to her channel on March 7th, 2011, just months before her disappearance. It began like any other video of Cheyanne's, lighthearted and humorous. But then things took an unexpected turn. When Cheyanne was streaming this video live, she unintentionally captured a glimpse of the man who had been preying on her. In the middle of filming, a man suddenly entered the room, though only his lower half appeared on camera. Cheyanne, who was normally energetic and lively, immediately changed. She quieted down, grabbed the man's arm, and whispered, "I'm on a live stream, be careful." The man responded with a casual, "Okay," but then proceeded to grab her. Cheyanne reacted with a loud stop, falling back onto her bed before snapping back into her comedic persona.
I know what I can do.
What?
I don't know. I should be careful. See, stop! Did I say you were in this? No, you weren't. Get away! Help! See how abusive? No, he's not abusive. No! Stop!
Yes, I am. I'll pull her out.
No!
Alright.
See what I have to go through every day? Mister, I don't need Stop! See?
The man then re-entered the frame, this time playfully engaging her in what looked like a slap fight, switching to a humorous tone and clearly performing for the camera. He left shortly afterwards, and Cheyanne resumed the video as if nothing unusual had happened. The man's close physical presence, the secrecy of his approach, the shift in Cheyanne's demeanor, all of these elements spoke volumes, suggesting something deeply troubling. As detectives continued to comb through Cheyanne's other videos, they began piecing together clues about the identity of the mystery man. Once they identified him, their reaction was one of shock. It's here that the disturbing story will start to unfold. The investigation was redirected to her stepfather, Terry Abbas, once again. Since there was no direct evidence to confirm Terry's evil intentions towards Cheyanne, police were convinced that Abbas had posed a threat to Cheyanne and likely played a role in her disappearance. With this, Terry Abbas became the primary suspect in the case.
We're a little bit concerned of a couple of things. Number one, that he might flee. Number two, we're hopeful that he might trip himself up if he's really nervous about our investigation, and he might go back to the scene of the crime. If he did, in fact, murder Cheyanne, he might try to move the body or conceal it more than it is.
Detectives grew increasingly certain that Terry knew more about Cheyanne's fate than he was letting on. Hoping he might lead them to a clue, the task force decided to monitor his movements by placing a tracker on his car. Given that the family had frequently gone on camping trips to various remote locations, investigators theorized that if Abbas had harmed Cheyanne, he might revisit a secluded site to cover his tracks. If he did kill Cheyanne, he might return to one of those familiar camping spots. So they placed the tracking device on his car, set up the monitoring software, and waited to see where he'd go.
But we also were of the mind that he wants to keep up the illusion that he's still cooperating. And so he's not going to go anywhere. He's going to stick it out as long as he possibly can. So we placed the tracking device on the vehicle. So I fire up the computer. I'm anxious to see, where's this guy going? What's he doing?
After activating the tracker, detectives observed him leaving his home, stopping at a gas station, and then crossing the bridge into Iowa. But then, without warning, the tracking signal abruptly stopped. This was the moment in the case that no one could have predicted.
And I'm like, okay, what happened? Did he find the tracking device and throw it in the Mississippi River? Was my first thought.
With this lead going cold, the team decided it was time to confront the family more directly. They needed to bring the possibility of foul play into the open.
This is a confession case. You know, it's either a confession or somehow we stumble across her body. So we decided as a group, we're going to bring them in, interview all of them at one time in separate rooms, and after our interviews, send them on to a polygrapher, and felt that that was our best option.
All of Cheyanne's family members agreed to come in for interviews, except Terry Abbas. His reason was reportedly that he had work obligations, but his absence stood out as a red flag to investigators.
Someone who doesn't show up when everyone else is participating, to me, is a big red flag. and there's a reason he doesn't want to be there.
At the arranged meeting, the rest of Cheyenne's family members agreed to sit for formal questioning and undergo a lie detector test to assist the investigation. Terry Abbas, however, initially resisted, though he ultimately had no choice but to comply. When Abbas arrived, he was interviewed by a seasoned FBI agent who was part of the investigation team.
So on the 18th of September, when we had scheduled the interviews, they all in fact arrived. We spoke to them briefly as a group, and then we told them exactly what was coming up. You know, we're gonna separate you, we're gonna interview you, we're gonna find out every single detail as to what led up to her missing. And we're gonna figure out why she left. And then, from that point, we're moving you on to a polygrapher.
It was a decisive moment for the investigation, as detectives hoped the interviews and lie detector test results would finally provide some answers. However, the deranged motive behind the unthinkable crime that they would soon uncover would leave the police in shock. There was yet another twist in the story. When the scheduled interview time arrived, Terry Abbas was nowhere to be found. Concerned about his absence, FBI Special Agent Wayne Jakowski, who had been coordinating with Cheyenne's family, decided to track him down. Jakowski located Abbas in East Dubuque and escorted him to the police station to ensure his participation in the investigation.
It was definitely intentional to let him know that we were going to have a polygrapher waiting after the interview. We want to put as much mental pressure and police presence in their mind as possible. We separated them, we interviewed them all. Mom, the boyfriend, and the brother were seemingly pretty upfront.
Detectives noted that his responses lacked the specificity and sincerity they expected, and the team sensed a shift as Abbas's demeanor hinted at something he was concealing. The investigative team was counting on the polygraph test to apply enough pressure to make Abbas reveal the truth. Right from the start, beyond the simple baseline questions verifying his name and date of birth, he began failing the test. The FBI agent administering the polygraph confronted Abbas, explaining that the results clearly indicated he was not being truthful. The agent told Terry that this wasn't going well for him and that his answers didn't seem honest.
We decided we're going to put Terry Abbas in the videoed interview room because he's most likely the one that would be our offender. And if he confesses, we want to have it on video.
Under increased scrutiny, Abbas began to unravel. And what Abbas revealed next would solve the mystery of Cheyenne's heart-wrenching story.
Oh, you got your man. When you say that, who were you referring to? I have to ask. Hey, you got Terry Abbas. Cheyanne is not with us. She's gone.
During his initial confession, he recounted a troubling story. He claimed to have taken Cheyanne up into the woods behind their home, where they spent time running around and playing. Cheyanne had wanted him to chase her through the forest, so he did, though he was clumsy, slipping and sliding as he tried to keep up. According to Abbas, he eventually slipped and, at some point, blacked out. When he regained consciousness, he discovered Cheyanne lying lifeless before him with his hand wrapped around her neck.
We go back to that day when she came home from school and just kind of start from there, from the best of your memory. We were joking around. We were outside. And she wanted me to chase her. I chased her. She went up in the forest. I chased her up there for a few minutes. And I fell. Okay, you fell? Yeah, slipping and sliding. She thought it was funny. And we're just blur eyes on the way out. I guess what you say, like I just snapped. Before I knew it, I was standing over a body. Oh. Last thing I remember, my hand was over her neck for some reason. Just over her neck and doing what? Squeezing, I guess. And I panicked. What happened to cause that? I got no clue. No honest clue.
FBI agent Tchaikovsky knew that Terry wasn't telling the whole truth. He knew there was more to the story. And so he continued to build a rapport with Terry, creating an environment of trust and safety.
What other things are going on between you and Cheyanne? I need to understand that a little bit. Could you help me?
Everything was great. Here's why I can't figure out why did us happen. It's been all perfect.
Would there have been any other injuries on her from at any point that you might have hit her or struck her for any reason?
No. How far as I could reflect.
Did you ever hit her at any point in time for any reason?
No. I'm not a violent person. That's what I can't understand.
Falling for Agent Tchaikovsky's facade, what Terry told the FBI agent left the detective in chills.
But I just knew I was going to get caught. I just want to come clean. I just want to get this over with, get the healing process started on her. That's boring.
That's
right. I know she's going to get hit by guns.
Were you sexually involved with her at all in any way?
No.
I need to know that too if you were. If there's something else that might have caused some of this, so I can understand as best as I can.
No.
No sexual type of relationship between you?
No.
Ever at any point in time?
Well, let me back that statement up. You only get the whole truth, though. It's fucking truth.
I appreciate it.
Yes, there was.
I don't know how exactly it all came to be, but somehow he felt as though he could tell me his deepest, darkest secret.
You're getting right up there.
Happened up in the woods while you were chasing her? So you had intercourse with her that day before this happened?
It did happen.
Following the sexual act, he strangled her to death. He stated that he dug a fairly deep hole by himself after the act. He lured Cheyanne up there and put her into the hole after assaulting and strangling her.
And what did you do right after that?
Boy, got a shovel and dug a hole. I don't know why I did.
During the interview with Terry Abbas, he was asked if he'd lead the team to the gravesite where he had allegedly buried Cheyanne, and he agreed. There was another set of the most sinister confessions that the cops were about to discover. Finally, investigators had a confession, but they now faced the heart-wrenching task of breaking the news to Cheyanne's family, who had been holding on to hope for her safe return. When Cheyanne's mother was informed, the news devastated her. She broke down in tears, becoming inconsolable. For nearly 2 years, Cheyanne's mother had clung to the belief that her daughter was alive and staying with someone who would eventually help her return home. The shock was intensified by the knowledge that Cheyanne was likely buried only about 100 yards from her family's home. Though the police had secured a confession and felt confident that Abbas was responsible, they had yet to locate Cheyanne's body. The task force decided to move forward immediately with the search, aiming to provide closure to her loved ones and confirm Abbas's account. Abbas led them to a woodland area where he claimed to have killed Cheyanne, directing the team to what he believed was her burial spot. On September 18th, shortly after Abbas's confession, investigators arrived at the wooded location he indicated. Abbas led them close to the site he remembered, marking a significant starting point for the search team.
Okay, I want to take a good look at this. Park. Is this where Cheyanne is? Yes, it's where Cheyanne's at. And how did she get here? By me.
And I asked him, I said, Terry, I said, how far down did you bury her?
About how far down do you think she is? About 45 foot. And this was a hole that you had dug? Yes. Did anyone help you put her in there? No. You did this by yourself? Yes.
And I didn't believe him.
So after she died, did you leave her here when you went to get the shovel? And then did you bury her the same day that she died? How many times have you come up to visit Cheyanne? Do you remember when that was? It's a few days. Did anyone help you with this at all? No. This was all you? Okay. Did you tell anyone you did this? No. And is this the general area? Because I remember you telling Wayne that you had some sort of sexual intercourse with her. Is this that general area? Right over there. Right behind him. Show us. Hope it's clear back now. Liz was here, and then where you buried her? Is that where you killed her? Back now. 4 or 5 foot from there.
However, as hours passed, they found themselves digging deeper and deeper with no sign of Cheyenne's body. Anxiety grew among the investigators as they peeled away inch after inch of soil, only to come up empty-handed. Despite Abbas's guidance, they started to worry that they were either digging in the wrong area or had been misled entirely.
And working up on search warrants and all that kind of stuff that we're going to need to do what we needed to do to bring her home.
Me just to recover her remains and bring some closure for everyone.
With the excavation, it's very meticulous. I mean, they're just taking layer by layer and all the dirt getting sifted, and every little nugget is being looked at and examined.
It became very frustrating, so we had a lot of people out there working around the clock to try to find her, and we're not finding anything. We're not finding it. Usually we would find something by now.
This isn't adding up. As far as what his initial confession was, digging the hole the same day as the murder.
We believe that we have the right location now, but we really don't know.
What if he's lying about the location? We really believed he was just screwing with us.
The investigators reached out to Abbas once again. Abbas, now willing to speak, was prepared to explain why Cheyenne's body had not been found at the initial search site.
There's about 30 FBI agents up there. We've been digging since yesterday. And I'm going to be honest with you, I was getting a little worried because we're going down and down and down, and I'm not seeing nothing.
Just based on the information that our ERT team had said, usually people are not buried so deep in the ground. So was he being truthful? Was he not being truthful?
And what I'm having trouble with here, Terry, what I'm having a little bit of trouble with is one guy digging this hole in that time frame that you're saying.
It didn't take me that very long to dig that.
With that little shovel. You follow me?
During this interview, about 30 minutes in, Abbas made a shocking confession, revealing that he'd actually dug Cheyenne's grave the day before he murdered her, not after. This was clear evidence that he'd planned the murder in advance.
Now's the time, Terry. Now's the time to completely let that ghost, to let that demon out of your body. To completely let him out, because he's still in there and he's still gnawing at you, because I can see it in your eyes. He's still gnawing at you. A little bit now, a little bit there, a little bit later, and that's going to get nothing but worse as the rest of your life goes by. And I've dealt with these types of things before, and I know that the hardest thing to do is to let that demon out. But once he's gone, you got your life back. You got the inside of you back. And don't live with yourself for the rest of that demon the rest of your life, because you don't deserve that. Let that demon out. Let him out now and tell us exactly how that went down. And you will feel better. And that demon won't be gnawing at your heart. Let him out.
You guys was right about one thing. It took longer to dig the hole than you think. I did dig it day before. And yes, I did. I did plan on killing her.
This confession also shed light on one of the investigation's most puzzling elements. Detectives were looking for Cheyenne's body in the right spot, but since Abbas had spent days digging up a deep grave, she was going to be at least 5 feet below. But this was not the end of the shocking confessions in this case. In fact, he was about to reveal one of the most twisted secrets. In that second interview, Abbas admitted that he'd made Cheyanne write the goodbye note nearly a month before her death, initially suggesting it was part of a prank they'd play on Cheyenne's mother. He claimed they'd intended for Cheyanne to pretend to run away, leaving only a note to frighten her mother briefly. However, instead of going through with the joke, Abbas decided to save the note, knowing he could use it to divert suspicion in the future. For Abbas, this prank note became the perfect cover to explain her disappearance, giving him a twisted alibi that would make it seem as though Cheyanne had simply run away.
I think what happened is that you went to Cheyenne and said, hey, let's put a practical joke on your mom. And then let's write this note. and that you held on to this note. And then now you're formulating a plan.
When this all went bad and she ended up dead, he remembered he had that note, that would come in handy for a time like this.
It was done like at least 30 days prior when I was getting ready to dig the hole, until later on it just snapped in my head saying, hey, this would be a perfect good time to use the note.
With this new perspective, detectives began piecing together the true motive. They believed that Abbas had been sexually abusing Cheyanne for years, and as she grew older, feared she might reveal what he'd done. In July, Cheyanne had reportedly confided in a friend, hinting at the abuse, and detectives suspected that she may have even threatened to tell others. Abbas, realizing the increased risk of exposure, knew he had to silence her to protect himself. In this chilling turn of events, investigators now understood that he'd meticulously planned her murder to permanently eliminate this threat. Armed with Abbas's new confession, the forensics team returned to the search area and finally began to uncover evidence of Cheyanne's remains. While carefully excavating, one of the FBI evidence technicians found a small bracelet, one that Cheyanne had worn regularly. Known as a friendship bracelet, the black and white band had a unique symbolic meaning for her. She believed it kept her demons away. Investigators recognized this bracelet from photos and knew upon its discovery that they were finally in the right place. The very next day, detectives were able to fully recover Cheyanne's remains.
The officials tell us this morning remains have been found behind the house, and they believe it is the remains of that 14-year-old missing East Dubuque teen, Cheyanne Kircher.
With Abbas's confession and mounting evidence, the team had everything necessary to prosecute him for Cheyanne's murder. Abbas was formally charged with murder, to which he confessed and pleaded guilty. Remarkably, while many defendants in his position would have been fighting for bail or trying to reduce their charges, Abbas seemed oddly resigned to his fate, pushing to expedite his trial and imprisonment. At his first court appearance, Abbas made the unusual decision to represent himself, opting to forego a defense attorney. The judge, aware of the gravity of his choice, urged him to consider it carefully. However, Abbas remained firm in his decision. The trial itself was swift, given his confession and guilty plea. By December 2013, the case came to a close as the court sentenced Terry Abbas to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict was final, ensuring that he'd remain behind bars in Illinois, serving a life sentence for the murder of his stepdaughter, Cheyanne. The entire community was deeply affected, united in grief, and resolved to keep Cheyanne's memory alive.
Tonight's going to be about honoring Cheyanne Kircher, and it'll be a way for the community to come together and get some closure.
Marchers purchased t-shirts with Kircher's picture on it, as well as bracelets and glow sticks. All money raised will go toward a memorial in her honor.
The chilling context behind her disappearance made her YouTube videos even more unsettling, particularly her last recorded upload. What's perhaps most haunting, though, is realizing that this final video represented only a small glimpse into a reality Cheyanne was likely enduring daily. It's heartbreaking to imagine all that Cheyanne faced behind the moments the camera captured and the quiet suffering that might have gone unseen. Terry's confessions came one after the other as the guilt kept feasting on his conscience. Do you think, in the end, he still hid some of the facts about Cheyanne's death and didn't disclose the full story to the detectives? Do you find it odd that Cheyanne lived in a crowded home and yet nobody knew of the abuse she'd been facing at the hands of Terry for years? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you.
Hey, how you doing? Good. Listen, we already trying to share something. We just want to see if we could talk to you for a couple of minutes.
No, yeah.
Okay. You have any idea what we want to talk to you about? Because I kind of think you might.
Well, my parents said that you were at their house.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think that's about?
It was about a baby.
Yeah. What about?
A baby that was left.
This is the exact moment when the mother realizes that detectives have uncovered her long-held secret. Authorities first got involved in this case in the spring of 1993 when two newspaper carriers stumbled upon the lifeless body of a newborn baby, abandoned and battered on a desolate, snowy country road in Geauga County, Ohio. The crime was so shocking that it would forever change the community. While the community embraced this nameless baby boy as their own, dubbing him Gyaga's child, his identity would remain a mystery for the next 26 years. A combination of new technology and old-fashioned police work would lead them to a breakthrough and ultimately to the home of Gail Eastwood Ritchey. Detectives anticipated solving one of the biggest cold cases in the region, but they were in for a few unforeseen surprises. As secrets from the past emerged into the light, the truth was difficult to comprehend. So what truly transpired? And how was this long-standing case ultimately resolved? On the morning of March 25, 1993, Cheryl Jenkins and Wendy Sweeney were out delivering papers along Sidley Road in Thompson Township in Geauga County, Ohio. It was a quiet countryside surrounded by woods, making it an ideal spot to dump something without attracting too much attention. As they cruised by, they initially mistook something on the roadside for a doll. Curiosity piqued, they circled back only to realize it wasn't a doll at all. It was a human baby. The sight sent chills down their spines, and they wasted no time dialing the police.
When I got there, it was obvious that this is a newborn baby that's laying in the middle of the road. It looked like there was a tire track over it, like somebody had driven down the road and actually it over.
The infant boy's tiny body was into a garbage bag. With his arm and leg missing, likely taken by animals, a piece of his umbilical cord was still attached. Cheryl and Wendy were outraged that someone could commit such a horrific act against an innocent baby.
I don't know how anybody could do that. It's awful. I wish we could have found it alive. Just hope they find who did it. I hope they're punished. Because there are a lot of people out there that want babies. They could have gave it up for adoption or something.
Initially, the detectives entertained the grim possibility that the mother of the child might have met a similar fate, prompting them to scour the woods for any additional evidence.
Any clothing, body parts, any kind of evidence that may have been left inadvertently at the scene by whoever left the baby here.
However, their search turned up empty-handed. As the body underwent autopsy, the detectives started wondering if this could have been the work of someone in the baby's own family. Geauga County Sheriff George Red Simmons held a press conference that same day asking for the public's help.
We have determined that the infant was Caucasian, that the infant was less than 6 months old, and that had been in the elements at least 12 hours.
He pleaded for anyone with relevant information to step up and help identify the baby boy. It was a desperate plea to shed light on the heartbreaking case and bring justice to the innocent victim.
The first thing got to me when I looked at it, I said, why? How? We wanted to know, was the child alive? Did it breathe any air, or was it born dead?
The autopsy reports brought forth even more heart-wrenching details. It was determined that the child was between 1 and 3 days old. Using a standard test of floating a lung in water, the coroner concluded that the baby had been born alive. However, despite thorough investigation, they couldn't determine the exact cause of death. It also remained unclear whether the infant was already deceased when abandoned or succumbed to the harsh elements after being left in the cold. The news of the infant's tragic fate gripped the hearts of people across Northeast Ohio. Despite not knowing the child personally, the community was devastated by the suspicion that he'd been abandoned and possibly harmed by his own family. Their sole desire was for justice to be served. Meanwhile, law enforcement tirelessly pursued any lead that could help identify the infant. The Geauga County Sheriff's Office made a heartfelt appeal to the child's mother, offering support and guidance to prevent further harm, but sadly, no one came forward. Deputies went door to door, interviewing residents in the area. Police agencies statewide were contacted to check for any reports of missing infants. Additionally, hospitals were contacted to obtain lists of births in the past 3 months across multiple counties. But the origin of the boy remained a mystery. Additionally, a tip line was established and flyers were distributed in hopes of garnering information. The efforts paid off as numerous calls poured in, including 2 from bus drivers who recalled seeing something unusual on their routes the morning the baby was found.
It was hard to determine if it was a stuffed baby doll or like a little stuffed animal.
So I went down in it and I looked and, wait a minute, that's a baby. I thought, nah, that has to be a baby doll.
However, they couldn't identify it as a human body at the time. Despite these promising leads, investigators were unable to gather concrete evidence. Detectives looked into 34 individuals and issued 24 subpoenas, but ended up hitting a brick wall. Even with all the manpower, tips, and hard work, they couldn't figure out who could abandon a child in such a terrible condition. The identity of the abandoned baby boy remained a mystery, but his death deeply affected the community. They decided to name him Geauga's Child, after the county, to give him a sense of belonging and honor his memory. Months later, in November 1993, the community came together for a funeral at a local church. Around 130 people showed up to pay their respects and say goodbye to the little one who had touched their hearts.
This baby boy suffered at the hands of people who didn't care.
To love and care for this little child.
Even during the funeral, detectives stayed on their toes, hoping it might stir up some leads. They figured a family member might show up, so they camped out at the church parking lot. There, they secretly recorded people who came to pay their respects. Despite their efforts, this operation yielded no significant breakthroughs. As the church service concluded, 2 members of the sheriff's office solemnly carried the tiny white casket out of the church. The community pitched in, donating money for the burial and tombstone, ensuring the child received a dignified farewell. One side of the grave marker had some touching poetry. It read, "Geauga's child lies here now in safety, just too late to save his life, too late to make things right, but not too late to teach us all to love and cherish life." After being denied a family and life, the baby finally found a home in death. The child was laid to rest, but the case wasn't.
Case is still active. It'll remain active until it is solved.
Wondering if the widespread attention surrounding Geauga's child would kick loose some guilt in the parents, investigators planted a camera at the child's grave, hoping to catch them sneaking back to pay their respects. For months and years, the camera rolled through snowstorms and sunny days alike. Many people left flowers, toys, and homemade clothes at the gravesite, but it never provided any closure. In the years that passed, the investigators tirelessly pursued every lead, leaving no stone unturned. They diligently explored hundreds of potential avenues, including visiting schools to inquire about any undisclosed underage pregnancies, but to no luck. Thomas Dewey, the lead homicide detective tasked with the case, spared no effort in keeping the investigation in the public eye. There was even a time when he felt they were on the brink of solving it. A tip took the authorities all the way to Arizona, chasing down a lead on a man who had once lived near where Geauga's child was discovered.
You know, he had a girlfriend that was pregnant 5 months prior. There's no child afterwards, after this pregnancy. We thought we had it figured out, and then when we got the result.
Despite the hopeful anticipation, this lead ultimately led to another dead end. Although disheartening, the investigators refused to give up hope. Every avenue, no matter how unconventional, was explored. Even suggestions from Nancy Meyer, a psychic investigator, were considered.
Very meek personality. She's no longer with the man that forced her into this. I think her big problem in coming forward is she feels that she would be arrested.
To see if Nancy's insights held any truth, detectives had to bide their time for over 2 decades as the case remained cold. It wasn't until advancements in DNA technology revolutionized the criminal justice system that the situation took a dramatic turn. In 2005, Detective Dewey retired from the sheriff's office. Even though we often visited the gravesite, he had to step away from the investigation. Detective Don Seaman took the reins from there. The real breakthrough in the case arrived in 2018. It was a time when headlines nationwide buzzed with news of forensic genealogy cracking long-standing mysteries, such as the Golden State Killer case. Seaman saw the potential of this innovative technology in identifying Geauga's child.
So I approached our sheriff and the prosecutor with the thought of hopefully trying this new investigative technique.
And his big ask was, he says, listen, I think this is going to cost $5,000 and I'd like you and the sheriff to split it.
We've got another idea, it's worth a try.
You know, what the heck, let's do it. Let's spend the money, let's get the DNA profile, let's see if we get anything out of this.
So in September 2018, the process for submitting the preserved DNA began.
The Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office had kept tooth buds, DNA from those tooth buds from the baby, and that DNA was suitable for comparison.
According to experts, teeth are considered the most reliable source of DNA. Preserving such evidence was ahead of its time. So with this piece of evidence, hopes were high. Additionally, investigators had a vital piece of information from the DNA analysis that could potentially narrow down their search. The baby was determined to be of Middle Eastern descent, possibly Lebanese. However, pinpointing the baby's parents proved to be no easy feat. About a month later, they encountered another setback. The lab they partnered with hit a roadblock. They couldn't locate sufficient close relatives to advance the investigation.
The hits that would come up initially were very distant, like third to fourth generation cousins.
So the Geauga County Sheriff's Department had to delve deeper on its own. They decided to take a bold step and submitted the baby's DNA to GEDmatch, popular among individuals interested in tracing their ancestry. After months of tireless investigation, Detective Seaman and his team painstakingly constructed a family tree comprising over 1,400 individuals to trace the parents of Geauga's child. These individuals hailed from various corners of the globe, spanning different countries. They were identified based on the DNA samples they'd previously voluntarily provided to the online database. In the end, they managed to locate the individual who submitted the closest DNA match found on the site.
We did identify a family member very early on, who without him, we would not be here today.
The lead brought them to a man named Vernon Holden, living in Omaha, Nebraska. Without hesitation, the detectives reached out to him.
Hello? Hello, is this Mr. Holden?
Yes.
Mr. Holden, my name is Don Seaman.
As it turned out, Vernon, a third-generation cousin match of Geauga's child, had submitted his father-in-law's DNA to the database.
We're all trying to do everything we can, so with your help, hopefully we can get closer to some closure for this.
I can help. I'll try to help.
All right. I really appreciate it.
Vernon volunteered to assist in creating a more comprehensive family tree for his father-in-law, a decision that would prove pivotal in cracking the 26-year-old cold case. However, before this could occur, the investigation needed to progress further with the leads generated from the family tree. Several new potential suspects were interviewed as a result, each bringing the investigation one step closer to uncovering the truth. One particular clue led them back to Sidley Road, where Geauga's child was discovered. An extended family member recalled visiting her uncle and his pregnant girlfriend at that location for Thanksgiving in November 1992. Strangely, the baby was never born, and she never heard anything more about it thereafter.
We got some DNA out of the trash, and he had a girlfriend that was pregnant at the time, no baby, and he was not the father. Another time that we thought we had it figured out, and we just didn't.
Despite the failures, detectives remained patient, confident that with each passing day, they were edging closer to solving the mystery. In early 2019, they finally figured out that Geauga's child was the grandchild of one of 10 siblings, but they hadn't matched the baby to anyone yet. There was only one living sibling, Harvey Eastwood, who lived in Lyndhurst, Ohio, about 30 miles from Geauga County. The tricky part was, he was adopted. Despite the slim chances, detectives decided to pay him a visit.
Yes, sir.
Hello, are you Harvey?
Yes, I am.
Harvey, my name is Don Seaman. I'm a detective with Geauga County Sheriff's Office. Just wanted to see if you'd be willing to talk to us.
Harvey had 2 daughters, neither of whom were from the area. In fact, he didn't even know where Geauga County was. So the detectives didn't think Geauga's child would be linked to him. After chatting with Harvey for about an hour, as they were getting ready to leave, Harvey dropped a bombshell. He mentioned that his children and grandchildren met their spouses at a camp.
Where was that at?
At Camp Koinonia.
What's it called?
Camp Koinonia.
The investigators hadn't heard of Camp Koinonia, so they looked it up. Turns out it was just a mile away from where the baby was found. They asked Harvey if any of his daughters had dated a man of foreign descent.
Your son-in-laws, are they of any foreign descent?
Oh, Mark has Lebanese descendants.
Mark Ritchey was the husband of Harvey's older daughter, Gail. Gail was 49 at the time, happily married, and had 3 grown children of her own. The detectives were left stunned by this revelation. Unsure of how to proceed, they decided to collect DNA samples from Harvey and his wife Nancy. When the results came back a few days later, they received confirmation. Harvey and Nancy were indeed the grandparents of Geauga's child, a baby they never even knew existed. After 26 years, the identity of the parents of Geauga's child was finally uncovered. But the last knot of this tangled web of a murder mystery was yet to be unraveled. The time had come for detectives to pay a visit to Gail at her residence in Euclid, Ohio. And on May 21st, 2019, they finally did.
So we had kind of set up outside her house early in the morning. We saw her husband leave and go to work, Mark. We had set up a hidden camera in a coffee cup so we could record as we approached her.
Gail was in her garage getting ready to leave for work as the investigators approached her.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Good. Listen, the Oregon County Sheriff's Office. We just want to see if we can talk to you for a couple of minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You have any idea what we want to talk to you about? Because I kind of think you might.
Well, my parents said that you were at their house.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think that's about?
It was about a baby.
Yeah. What about?
A baby that was left.
Mm-hmm.
This was finally the moment Geauga County detectives had been waiting for almost 3 decades. Despite their anticipation, they gave Gail the benefit of the doubt, allowing her to share her side of the story.
We don't know what was going on at the time. We don't want to speculate either, okay? So I don't think you want us to speculate. We're not here to arrest you, okay? We are here to take your DNA, okay? And we would like for you to tell us your side of the story, because we'd like to know. As of right now, you're not under arrest. You're not going to be arrested today. But we want to know what was going on. I think after 26 years, it's time.
Although Gail's facial expression suggested she might prefer to avoid the conversation altogether, the detectives reassured her that she was not in trouble. Eventually, she decided to reveal the secret she'd been hiding from the world for a long time. But before delving into the conversation, investigators needed to confirm definitively that Gail was indeed the mother of Geauga's child, despite her own words suggesting as much.
Well, what we'd like to do is get your DNA, okay? And then we would like for you to come back to our sheriff's office so that we can talk. You're not being arrested.
The investigators were taken aback by Gail's calm and composed demeanor. Unlike what they'd expected, she didn't appear scared or shed any tears, which most people would do in such a situation. It was crucial for them to understand how Geauga's child ended up abandoned on the side of the road. Did someone coerce Gail into this action, or was it her own choice? And most importantly, why did it happen? To get all these answers, once DNA swabs were collected, Gail was brought to the Geauga County Sheriff's Office for questioning.
You're not under arrest, okay, and we would like to get your side of the story, though. You know, obviously you had indicated that your parents had told you that we had been out, so I'm sure that you had kind of knew that this day was coming, that we were going to be coming out to talk to you.
Gail confessed to abandoning the baby and provided more details about the incident. She revealed that in the summer of 1992, at the age of 22, she was living with her parents and younger sister while dating her future husband, Mark Ritchey, who was a few years older than her.
I did not know I was pregnant.
During that summer, she became pregnant with Mark's child, but she didn't realize it until about 3 months before giving birth.
At the time, I still had my menstrual cycles. And then my menstrual cycles ended up stopping.
Okay.
I want to say about 3 months before the baby was actually born.
Okay.
And I honestly do not remember the date or the day when the baby was born. I do know it was in winter.
Despite discovering her pregnancy, Gail chose not to seek help and kept it a secret from everyone, her family, church friends, and even Mark. She mentioned that her weight, which was over 200 pounds, made it easy for her to conceal the pregnancy.
But you hadn't told anybody?
I had not. No one knew.
Gail continued her confession, recalling a day in March 1993 when she was at home in Shaker Heights, where she worked as a full-time nanny. Feeling unwell and alone while waiting for the children to return from school, she suddenly felt the urge to push.
The next thing I knew, I was giving birth to a baby in the toilet.
Confused and overwhelmed, Gail admitted she didn't know what to do, and the only option she saw was to dispose of the baby.
I didn't know what to do. The only thing I could think of was to put the baby in a bag.
After placing the infant in a bag, she cleaned the bathroom to cover her tracks and placed the baby in the trunk of her car. She then went on with the rest of her day, caring for the children before returning home. Several days later, possibly a week, Gail, with the baby still in her trunk, attended a church youth group outing at Camp Koinonia. From there, she drove a few miles to Thompson Township, where she ultimately abandoned the baby.
I got in my car and just drove. I don't know where I ended up. And I just ended up stopping on a road. I don't know which road. And I took the bag out of the trunk. And I laid it in the woods.
Gail couldn't remember how far she'd ventured into the woods to abandon her child.
Was anybody with you in the car?
No. No, I was by myself.
About how far off the road do you remember you went? Like with the bag? Like how far from the roadway you would have went? Or was there anything specific by there?
I remember stopping on the road. There was a lot of snow. I do remember a lot of snow. And I walked in as far as I could, and I left the back.
Detectives then confronted her with information from the coroner's report, suggesting that her baby was born alive.
And there had to be some type of screaming or something that you heard or saw.
It seemed evident that Gail may have always intended to abandon the baby.
I mean, did you intend on having the baby, or I mean, what were your intentions? Should have kind of come unexpectedly that day, but it sounds like you had made your mind up that, you weren't in the right spot at the time, you weren't telling anybody, this was kind of what you were planning on doing, for lack of better words.
I suppose.
Perhaps the saddest aspect of this ordeal was that after abandoning her newborn, she never looked back and simply carried on with her life.
Now, getting back to, you said you were at this family's house in Shaker Heights when the baby was born, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember their name or where they lived at?
I do.
Okay. What was their name?
I'd rather not.
When questioned about why she didn't confide in anyone, Gail explained that she was afraid.
But because of those circumstances, you didn't know what to do. Was it because you were young, because you weren't married? You're afraid to tell your parents? I understand you're Baptist.
I was definitely afraid to tell my parents. My father was very adamant about not having children before you're married. I was probably afraid that he would he would leave. I always go to the worst scenario and not the best scenario.
And what was the worst scenario in your mind?
Him leaving.
Investigators were curious about how clueless Mark was, especially given that Gail saw getting rid of the baby as the only way to keep her man. While Gail's interrogation continued at the Geauga County Sheriff's Office, other investigators visited Mark at his home. At that point, he had no inkling of what was happening with his wife.
How you doing, sir? We're detectives with the Geauga County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
We just have to talk to you about some stuff. My other partner and I, we've been, for the last year, like I said, we've been trying to identify this baby in the family. So, obviously, from 1993, we've had DNA. We get DNA, we try it, no good. And eventually, we just ran out of places to go.
They walked him through their investigation and explained how the family tree led them to Gail and Mark.
Today, we met with Gail, and Gail said that our detectives that she's talked to today are the only two she's ever talked to about birthing a child in Shaker Heights, putting it into a garbage bag, and driving it to Geauga County. So
my wife said this?
Mm-hmm. So
That's news to me.
At some point in June of 1992, or roundabouts, you guys got together and had, she got pregnant. And for whatever reason, she kept it from you. And in March of 1993, she gave birth to that baby. And for whatever reason that we're still trying to figure out, she didn't tell anybody, and she left that baby in Geauga County.
Wow. I don't know what to say.
After almost an hour of conversation, convinced of Mark's genuine shock and his lack of involvement in the murder of Geauga's child, detectives departed the house. However, the most significant revelation from Mark was that he was aware of one of Gail's pregnancies. Shockingly, he claimed it occurred before 1993, before Geauga's child was born. Mark revealed that Gail later informed him that she had experienced a miscarriage. This raised questions. Was Gail hiding more secrets? Was Geauga's child not her only abandoned child? While Gail remained under interrogation, it was time for the detectives to be blunt with her. They reminded her that her DNA would be entered into CODIS, the national database for storing and comparing DNA profiles from various sources. This was her final opportunity to come clean about anything she'd kept hidden.
But you know and I know this isn't the only time. That there's more times that this has happened. And now is the time that you need to tell us about those, Gail. How many other times has this happened?
One other time.
One other time? And when was that? Was it before or after this child?
Before.
Before.
Gail's shocking confession made it clear that Geauga's child was not her first victim, but another child had sadly fallen victim to her actions. She revealed that in 1991, at the age of 20, she went into labor in Mark's rental house in Cuyahoga County, Ohio. She abandoned this child in the same manner as she did with her second child.
He gave birth to it in the toilet.
Is it a boy or a girl?
I don't know.
You don't know.
And I never.
You didn't want to know?
I never looked.
Okay.
I don't know.
What happened after you gave birth to the child?
I did the same thing. Put it in a garbage bag.
And what did you do with the garbage bag?
I left it.
What do you mean you left it? What does that mean, Gail?
I took it and left it over by medical buildings in Eastwood.
Where did you leave it exactly?
There's a road called Brush Road. Goes up behind very tall medical buildings that are there. And I just left it over in the tall grass.
Kind of like field area you left in the tall grass?
Yeah.
What time of year was this?
Summer. I think it was summer.
Summer, and you think you're 21? Do you remember what year it would have been?
While detectives maintained their professionalism, they were stunned by Gail's apparent disregard for her children, who were cruelly denied the chance at life. For years, she frequented the same area where she abandoned Geauga's child with her other 3 children, seemingly unaffected by her dark past. Gail's confession was crucial for the authorities. If she'd committed the same crime more than once, it suggested a certain level of premeditation rather than a spur-of-the-moment decision as Gail portrayed. Despite this revelation, Gail was allowed to return home for the time being. However, before she left, detectives cautioned her about potential threats to her safety. After 26 years of seeking justice for the abandoned baby, the community now knew who was responsible. And this was not good news for her.
There's been news stories, newspaper articles, a news story that some of the original investigators and they maintain that grave stuff. So this is something that is very big in the community. And with that being said, we are concerned for your welfare.
Gail had been a resident of Euclid for over 20 years and appeared to blend in seamlessly with the community. Many found it difficult to believe that she was capable of such a heinous act. It was a hard pill to swallow for the people who had known her as an excellent wife and mother.
Church-going family, very respectable. She was so nice. I mean, I just can't. I don't understand. I just don't understand.
Meanwhile, detectives tried their best to locate the remains of her first child. It had been almost 3 decades since the incident. Sadly, despite Gail's detailed description of the specific area where she abandoned the baby, no evidence was found. However, Gail's freedom didn't last long, as on June 6, 2019, she was taken into custody and charged with the murder of Geauga's child.
26 years, the Geauga County Sheriff's Office has been working very hard to solve a case of Geauga's baby. Today we announce that the case has been solved. Gail Eastwood Ritchey, age 49, of Euclid, Ohio, was indicted for aggravated murder and murder.
However, she didn't face charges related to the 1991 case due to the lack of physical evidence. Gail pleaded not guilty to the charges, and her trial began on March 31, 2022. The defense argued that Gail did not murder her child, claiming instead that it was a stillborn baby.
She didn't do anything to purposely cause the death. This was a stillborn baby. And under those circumstances, your verdict can only be not guilty.
They also contended that there wasn't enough evidence for the medical examiner to conclusively determine if the baby had taken a breath.
There's no description, first of all, of where he took these tissue samples from in the lung. Right. Correct. And there's only one lung here, right? Yes. So if in a typical or routine situation, you would want tissue slides from both lungs, ideally, yes. And so that's another example of what would be either a vague and or incomplete report. True.
They even brought up Gail's difficult home life, citing her claim during interrogation that she'd been verbally abused by her father. The defense argued that Gail's decision to abandon the baby stemmed from extreme fear and low self-esteem.
It was a very cold household. They would have family dinners and there'd be very little discussion except for her father ranting that no daughter of mine will ever have a child out of wedlock. That is the Gail Ritchey that you're going to be judging.
The prosecution came in swinging, arguing that Gail wasn't just responsible for her child's death, but she ditched him like a piece of garbage.
Her actions caused the death of this child. But then finally, you have to look at, for an aggravated murder, did the state prove prior calculation and design? What does she do to prepare for the birth? Nothing.
They emphasized that Gail showed zero remorse, only embarrassment throughout the interrogation. She even kept referring to her child as it. They also revealed that Gail had confided to her boss, Colleen Rode, at Noreen Londrigan's School of Dance in Mayfield, where she worked as a receptionist, about being in trouble 2 weeks before her arrest. Although she withheld specific details, this admission lined up with the time when investigators obtained her DNA sample. It showed that she was aware of her guilt and the impending consequences of her actions.
Her husband just met with my mom and I just to give us a heads up that something was might be happening. They didn't go into any details at all.
The trial wrapped up in only 4 days, concluding on April 4th, 2022. After just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict, finding 51-year-old Gail Eastwood Ritchey guilty of murder. More than a month later, on May 24th, 2022, she received a life sentence with a possibility of parole after 15 years. Before she was sent off, the judge delivered some stern words to her.
Unable to face and address your own problems and the unwanted consequences your pregnancy might cause, in my opinion, you took the easy way out. You coldly and efficiently eliminated your problem by disposing of the only one who couldn't defend himself. He couldn't yell at you or berate you like you feared your father would. He couldn't leave you or break your heart like your boyfriend might. So I truly struggle to accept the explanation that you were young and afraid and alone. Maybe the first time those factors might explain your conduct, but not the second time. I believe you knew exactly how you could solve your problem with an unwanted pregnancy when Georgia's child came along because you had done it before. Calling you a monster who deserves life imprisonment might not be an unfair exaggeration. What I know is this: your wrongful efforts to conceal what happened in February 1993 did buy you 29 years of normal life where you got the chance to get married, raise children, and do some good works. But ultimately you gained that time on the back of a helpless infant whose body you concealed in the woods. Ironically, Georgia's child did more for you than you ever did for him, probably.
In the end, even though Georgia's child finally received justice, the wounds in the community will never fully heal. It's hard for them to wrap their heads around the idea that a mother could commit such an act and then go on living a normal life as if nothing happened. Cheryl Jenkins, one of the women who found the baby, expressed how the traumatic event has haunted her throughout her life.
I always think about him. I've never forgot that day. I mean, it's burned in my memory. Every step of that day. Dropped that kid on a doorstep, him on a doorstep, or done something with him, taken him to a church. For me, it stayed with me all my life, and Wendy had stayed with her all of her life because she couldn't have children.
However, amidst the pain, there's also a different side to this story. One where the community showed the child love and care, something he never received from his own flesh and blood. This case is truly heartbreaking and raises difficult questions about accountability and responsibility. What are your thoughts on this matter? Do you believe Gail was genuinely helpless, leading her to make such a desperate decision? Or do you think she simply opted for the easy way out, fully conscious of the consequences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, don't hesitate to share your suggestions in the comment section below. For more captivating true crime stories, like, share, and subscribe to our channel.